two deliverables published in the context of the LeMO project. First project report I would like to present is the one on the ethical and the social issues in the context of big data in the transport sector, and then the second one is the results that we have included in the report on the legal issues. So the first one, as I said, is the one on the ethical and social issues, and in this report we identify and examine several social and ethical issues that are relevant to the production, access, linking, and reuse of big data in the transport sector. This particular report is structured in three core main chapters. The first one, we introduce the concept of big data, like Ruud just explained, and its possible use in the transport sector. Then we examine 7 ethical and social issues which we have identified and the key challenges and opportunities related to such issue. And then finally, we discuss how to move forward on those ethical and social issues in relation to the use of big data in the transport sector. As you can see on the slide, we have attempted to provide practical illustrations in the context of the transport sector in order to really illustrate the theoretical observations that we make. So as I said, we have identified 7 ethical and social issues. As you can see on the slide, these relate to trust, surveillance, privacy, free will, personal data ownership, discrimination, and environment. The last topic, which is related to the environment, is however examined in another report of the LeMO project and also free to download on the LeMO website. Of course, I will not have the time to go into the detail of all the findings, but I'd like to highlight. There's an echo. Yeah, thank you. I will examine a few of these ethical and social issues, and the first one I would like to discuss is the issue of trust, where we saw that the huge amount, the diversity, and the sources of data lead to a lot of new opportunities, but at the same time they also lead to considerable challenges. For instance, in some cases, dynamic technological development do not offer individuals enough time to adapt, and this can obviously lead to significant trust issues. This is especially problematic when it comes to public transportation, for instance, where safety and security are linked to trust. Really, people need to feel safe when using transportation means which are definitely new, such as self-driving cars, or which could be perceived as being threatening, such as car sharing with unknown drivers. Another issue I would like to highlight, and which is included in our report, is the issue of privacy, but from an ethical perspective. Privacy includes 3 components: transparency, consent, and control. In short, we see that individuals really want to understand the processing of their data and to consciously control such processing activities. They also want to be empowered and consent to the use of their data in order to control the use of their data. Now, it is clear that the GDPR, which was already mentioned by Rémi, will have a considerable impact on these privacy issues, both from a legal but also from an ethical perspective. Obviously, organizations may see this development as an opportunity to guarantee high data protection standards to their customers and distinguish themselves from competitors. However, we see and we highlight in our report that the GDPR is likely to respond to several ethical issues and therefore improve the trust of end users, but there are some challenges that remain. Indeed, as we highlight, even though one single set of rules and principles is now applicable throughout the EU, privacy desires from individuals may vary between individuals, but also between situations. But this is obviously complex in practice, as this would require an ad hoc approach from different organizations, and this is unlikely to be achievable in practice. A one-size-fits-all approach, on the contrary, would lead and may lead to the application of the greatest common divisor, meaning the strongest privacy needs. And this would lead and this would eliminate the opportunity of performing farther-reaching big data analytics using personal data of people who are permissive. Now, the last issue from the ethical and social report I would like to highlight is the issue of discrimination. We noted that using big data analytics to improve business processes and provide personalized service may lead, of course, to discrimination of certain groups of people. Indeed, big data analytics relies on the categorization of information and the conclusions drawn from this. In that sense, we highlight in our report that discrimination might therefore be an inherent part of the analytics process. Another important aspect of data-driven discrimination is the social differences in access to technologies and the education or skills to use it. And this is often referred to as digital divide, which we also examine in our study. It is rather clear that big data analytics can be a tool to make existing discriminatory decisions visible. Discrimination may be resolved by personalized services on big data analytics. However, in spite of this opportunity, there are still some biases, and in any event, personalized services may also cause discriminatory treatment by excluding certain groups. And also, big data analytics may lead to new discrimination because it makes it possible to distinguish between people on a whole range of aspects related to the behavior and other personal aspects. Now, unfortunately, I will not have the time to dig into our other specific conclusions, but in general, we concluded in our report on the ethical and social issues that big data may both be a challenge and an opportunity depending on the use made of it. Nevertheless, I must admit that it is clear from our report that at this stage, the list of challenges is still longer than the list of opportunities. So as to enable and/or facilitate the production, access, linking, and reuse of big data in the transport sector, we believe that certain actions should be taken. Broadly speaking, two types of actions can be distinguished. On the one hand, there are the regulatory intervention, which means the legislation adopting standards or soft law. And then on the other hand, there are some design-related actions, which means basically ensuring that the system applications are designed in such a way so that the decisions are being taken in an ethical manner. Now, with respect to that last point, ethics by design, this seems to be a very good way to move forward, notably in light of the existing principles of privacy and security by design. This leads me to my attempt to try to summarize some of the conclusions that we have in our second report, which is a report on the legal issues. Again, we have provided numerous examples and the concrete applications of the issues in the transport sector. And in our main chapter in this report on the legal issues, we highlight 13 key legal issues. As you can see on the slide, we have highlighted those 13 legal issues. Now, I will not have the time to dig into all of the results of that particular report, but I would like to highlight several findings and conclusions. The first one I would like to discuss is the one on privacy and data protection, but from a legal perspective. In our report, we have demonstrated that some concepts, some principles and obligations under the GDPR appear to be problematic for the uptake of big data. More precisely, we show that some GDPR requirements are particularly difficult to reconcile with the concept of big data. For instance, the qualification of the various actors is quite a challenge, but also the application of some of the core principles of the GDPR are difficult to apply to big data, such as data minimization. Also, the exercise by individuals of their different rights, such as the data portability right, is quite difficult in a big data context. The challenges we examine in our report demonstrate that finding a balance between the various interests at stake is extremely important. And we believe, and we conclude in this particular report, that it is essential to keep in mind Recital 4 of the GDPR, which includes 3 key elements. The first one is the right to the protection of personal data is not an absolute right. The second, privacy must be considered in relation to its function in society and be balanced against other fundamental rights. And then third, the principle of proportionality must be taken into account. We further conclude in relation to privacy and data protection that any guidance or administrative and judicial decision should carefully take into account all the interests at stake and avoid oversimplistic reasoning and illustrations. Failing to do so would necessarily impede the development of disruptive technologies and prohibit the emergence of a true data economy, including in the transport sector. Another identified key legal issue I would like to discuss is the free flow of data. Indeed, we show in our report that there are known issues at EU level related to the existence of restrictions to the cross-border flow of data. And these restrictions are due to localization requirements that exist at national level. Now, in such context, we explain in our report that the new EU free flow regulation is very interesting, as it will notably aim to ensure a free flow of data across EU member states. And obviously, the elimination of data localization requirements is expected to create more innovation, which will be, of course, positive and will positively impact big data in the transport sector. However, we also highlight in our report the issues related to the overlapping of the free flow regulation, which only applies to non-personal data, and then the GDPR, which this one applies to only personal data. This indeed creates some concern regarding the alleged comprehensiveness, but also the coherence regarding the free flow of data in the EU. Indeed, as we show in our report, it creates intricate issues in big data context due to the mixed data sets of personal but also non-personal data. And we try to demonstrate that in practice, it will often not be possible to determine which parts of a data set contains personal data and which contains non-personal data. Therefore, it will be quite difficult to apply each regulation to the relevant part of the data set. A last legal example I would like to highlight is the issue of data ownership. We indeed demonstrate in our report that the current legal framework relating to data ownership is not satisfactory and is also rather complex. This is on the one hand because there is no specific data ownership right that exists, but also on the other hand because the existing data-related rights do not respond sufficiently and adequately to the needs of the actors in the data value cycle. Up until today, we see that the only imaginable solution is capturing the possible relationship between the various actors in contractual arrangements, which we call data sharing agreements. However, we also demonstrate in our report that filling the data ownership gap with contractual arrangements is far from being ideal. Indeed, we demonstrate that it would be practically burdensome, but probably even impossible to regulate via contracts all the data ownership issues. And this is due to the multitude of actors, but also the multitude of data sources. And then on top of that comes the issue where contracts are in principles non-binding, and therefore they would be unenforceable against third parties. And this particular issue is also examined in another section of our report regarding data sharing agreement. Now, unfortunately, I'm compelled to stop here on trying to summarize the 400 pages of the two reports that we have. But as it was said earlier, you are free to download them on the website of the LeMO project. But you can also, if you're more interested in some of the issues, look at the different articles that we are publishing right now. We have a series of 17 articles that summarize the different legal, but also the ethical and the social issues. We've already published 8 of these articles on our website, twobirds.com, and we have the 9 coming ones published every Monday of the coming weeks. Thank you.